All right, coffee lovers, get ready for a deep dive today.
A deep dive into your morning cuppa.
Exactly. We're going all the way from
A
fruit.
cup.
You got it. Thanks to NileBlue and their YouTube video.
Making coffee from scratch?
Is hard.
Let me tell you, the title is no joke.
It really is. It's easy to forget that coffee starts as a fruit.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I knew it came from a plant, but this video really threw me for a loop. Coffee beans, they actually start life inside these bright red berries.
Oh, coffee cherries?
Coffee cherries, they look like tiny grapes.
They really do.
Seriously.
And it's not just the appearance that's surprising.
Oh, tell me.
Well, in this video, the coffee cherries were frozen before they even started the journey.
Frozen? Why on earth would they do that?
Well, the cherries came from a viewer in a warmer climate and had to travel quite a distance. Freezing them is a way to preserve their quality and make sure they don't spoil on the way. Plus, it actually makes it easier to separate the good cherries from the bad ones. Oh, interesting. So how do you tell a good cherry from a bad one? Is it like picking out the perfect avocado at the grocery store?
It's similar in a way. You're looking for those visual cues of ripeness and quality. The video showed them cutting open both good and bad cherries, and the difference was pretty clear. Good cherries have plump, dense beans inside, while the bad ones are all shriveled and underdeveloped.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's what surprised me. They said even a good cherry with a perfect bean inside doesn't smell or taste anything like coffee.
Yeah, it's true.
They compared the smell to old grapes. Not exactly the aroma I associate with my morning cup.
Right, because the coffee flavor we know and love doesn't magically appear in the cherry. It's developed through a whole series of processes and chemical transformations, starting with the extraction of those beans. And that process, as you see in the video, is quite labor-intensive.
It was crazy. They had this mountain of coffee cherries and they were extracting the beans by hand. It looked incredibly tedious and time-consuming.
Yeah, it really highlights the human element behind our daily cup of coffee, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And speaking of processes, they mentioned using something called the honey process for these particular beans. What's that all about?
The honey process is all about manipulating the natural sugars in the coffee cherry. Instead of removing all the pulp, they leave a layer of the sugary, sticky pulp on the bean during the drying process.
So it's like a slow-cooked sugar coating. Does that affect the flavor?
Absolutely. This honey process tends to give the coffee sweeter, fruitier notes, and it can also influence the body and mouthfeel.
Interesting. That actually explains why those beans were browned instead of the usual green.
Exactly. The residual sugar is caramelized during drying, giving the beans that darker color. And that extra sugar can make them trickier to roast, as we'll soon see.
Speaking of roasting, this is where the video takes a dramatic turn. We go from peaceful cherry picking to a full-blown roasting roller coaster.
Indeed. The first roasting attempt using a simple pan on the stovetop was a bit of a disaster.
It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. The beans started darkening way too fast, smoke was billowing everywhere, and you could see the panic rising in the host's eyes.
Pan roasting requires a lot of finesse and experience, especially with a delicate bean like the honey-processed geisha they were using. It seems the heat was way too high.
And they never got that first crack sound that signals a good light roast, right?
Right. First crack is the sound of the beans releasing steam and expanding as they roast. It's a crucial indicator of the roasting stage. But instead of reaching that point, those poor beans went straight to burn offerings.
They looked like little charcoal briquettes. You could practically smell the burnt coffee through the screen.
It's a classic case of taking the pyrolysis stage too far.
Pyro what now?
Pyrolysis. It's one of the key stages of coffee roasting. Essentially, it's when those complex chemical reactions happen inside the bean, creating the aroma and flavors we associate with roasted coffee. But just like with anything, too much of a good thing can be disastrous.
So it's like baking a cake. You need heat to make it rise and develop flavor, but crank up the oven too high and you end up with a charred mess.
Exactly. And in this case, the high heat created a cascade of unwanted compounds that taste bitter, acrid, and just plain unpleasant.
So that first batch was a total bust. But bless their hearts, they didn't give up. They decided to try again this time with an electric coffee roaster.
A much more controlled environment, which seemed promising at first.
Right. But even with the fancy equipment, disaster struck again.
It seems they still struggled to control the heat, particularly given the challenging nature of those honey-processed geisha beans.
So 2 strikes, and they're down to their last few beans. You could practically feel the tension through the screen. But then, in a twist I never saw coming, they brought out an air fryer.
Now that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, folks. An air fryer, I was skeptical.
It's not the typical coffee roasting tool, that's for sure.
No, it's not. What makes an air fryer a good choice for roasting coffee?
Well, think about what went wrong with the previous attempts, inconsistent heat, and lack of control. An air fryer, on the other hand, is designed for even heat circulation. Plus, you can set precise temperatures, which is crucial for roasting those delicate beans.
So they basically turn their kitchen appliance into a makeshift coffee roaster.
Exactly. And you could see in the video that they didn't just wing it. They did their research meticulously planning out the temperature and timing based on other people's experiences roasting coffee in air fryers.
So did this air fryer gambit pay off?
Well, the tension was palpable as they loaded those precious remaining beans into the air fryer basket. Remember, this was their last chance. But as the air fryer whirred to life, something magical happened.
Did those beans finally roast properly?
Oh, they did. The video showed the beans slowly browning to that perfect shade with minimal charring this time around. And then came that beautiful sound, the first crack, loud and clear.
Okay, for those of us who aren't coffee roasting aficionados, what exactly is first crack and why is it so important?
Imagine those beans like tiny pressure cookers. As they roast, the heat creates steam and pressure inside the bean. First crack is literally the sound of the bean cracking open as it releases that built-up pressure and steam.
Ah, so it's a sign that the beans are roasting properly and reaching that sweet spot for flavor development.
Precisely. It's a key indicator of a successful light roast.
Okay, so first crack, achieved beans looking good. What happened next?
The video showed them quickly cooling down the beans after the roast, which is crucial to stop the cooking process and preserve those delicate flavors. Then came the moment of truth, grinding those beans and brewing a cup of coffee.
I bet the anticipation was killing them. After all that trial and error, they finally had a chance to taste the fruits, or should I say beans of their labor.
The relief and excitement were palpable as they took their first sips, and the verdict?
Drum roll, please.
Success. They both raved about the coffee, describing it as smooth, mild, and lacking the bitterness you often get with poorly roasted coffee.
So all that effort, all those burnt batches, it all led to a delicious cup of coffee.
It certainly did, and it highlights an important point. Sometimes the most unconventional approaches can lead to the most rewarding results.
It's a good reminder to think outside the box and not be afraid to experiment. Now, before we wrap up, I have to ask, what was their final rating for this hard-earned cup of coffee?
They gave it a very respectable 8.5 out of 10.
Not too shabby, considering the journey those beans went through.
Indeed. And remember, this entire saga from frozen cherry to final brew is captured in NileBlue's YouTube video. Making coffee from scratch is hard.
It's a must-watch for any coffee enthusiast. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember, even the most familiar things can hold hidden depths and fascinating stories waiting to be uncovered.
Cheers to that.
Welcome back, deep divers. We went from frozen coffee cherry all the way to a delicious cup of air fryer roasted coffee.
Really explored the process behind it.
Right. I feel like I've been living in a coffee-flavored bubble this whole time, oblivious to all the science, the skill, the work that goes into those beans.
I think what makes this so interesting is that it's a real person doing this at home with YouTube tutorials and an air fryer.
The ultimate DIY story.
Yeah, and I think there's a valuable lesson there for all of us to remember that even when things get tough or we make mistakes, there's always something to learn, and often the most unexpected solutions can lead to the best outcomes.
That never give up spirit. You know, after those first two roasting disasters, I would just order takeout coffee. But they kept going and ended up with something really special.
It shows a desire to understand where our food and drinks come from and appreciate the craftsmanship, I think.
Yeah, for sure. As we wrap up, I'm left with a newfound appreciation for every cup I brew. It's no longer just a caffeine fix. It's a reminder of the dedication, the experimentation, the artistry that brings those beans all the way from the farm to my mug.
Well said. For anyone listening who wants to dive deeper, I highly recommend checking out NileBlue's YouTube video. Making coffee from scratch is hard. You'll see the whole process yourself.
Definitely a must-watch. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember, even the most familiar things can have hidden depths into fascinating stories.
Cheers.
Cheers.